So we're getting pretty close to about 20 people. So I guess we can start the meeting off right now. And sorry to interrupt, anyways, but I guess we can start off over now. So thank you everyone for coming. We're going to be doing our second sprint panel, and we have our guest speakers, Mahaiman, Monik, Sari, and Grace. And to introduce myself, my name is Rohit, and I'm the strategy of design on the U of T Sprint team. And currently I'm an intern at IBM, and I'll pass it on over to Andy.
So hi everyone, my name is Andy. I'm the Director of Technology at SprintUofT. Currently I'm a project manager at Zynga, and previously I was a technical product manager at Deloitte. And so for today's event, we've received again around 100 student responses, and we're excited to have like an overwhelming number of questions from all of you. We do have a ton of questions from both the forums and previously prepped. So we'll try our best to answer as many of them as possible, and we do hope to eventually get to everything through future offerings. So for example, we have video interviews, spotlights on employees, more panels such as intern panels, recruiter panels slated in the pipeline.
Awesome. So come on, Andy.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so just to give you guys a rough idea of what U of T Sprint really is about, is we saw the need to bridge the gap between what U of T students throughout are taught in class and what they're shown in the tech industry. And we want to bridge this gap and have that communication between...
Wait, why are there no...
And bridge that gap between alumni and students as well. So we're focusing on different industries, and for today we have a PM, a SWE, a data scientist, and a UX and UI person. So we hope to help you in your tech career, but most importantly, we hope to create a positive tech community at the U of T institution where we're encouraging one another, help each other to succeed.
Yeah, so just a quick, I guess, housekeeping as we just get started. Please do keep your camera off and your mic off to respect the panelists. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the chat. We will have team members monitoring the chat, and then once we have time after all the prep questions, we will bring those up. So let's get started. Do you guys want to kind of each introduce yourself, your school, your program, what company you're at, and like maybe a fun fact about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. I guess I can go first. Hi everyone, I'm Mohaiman. I just graduated from the University of Toronto. I studied computer engineering, and I also completed a business minor at U of T. I'll be joining Microsoft as a software engineer this August, and I'll be joining on their Azure Data Intelligence group. I guess like over the last 5 years, I have the amazing opportunity to work at some Canadian companies such as RBC, TELUS, Lookout Networks, and a couple of other places. So I'm really excited, I guess, to be here, and like I can talk about those if you guys have any question. And I guess like a fun fact about me is like I have 2 baby rabbits, and I love them more than anything on this planet right now.
What are their names?
One of them's Caramel, and the other one's Oreo. And they also have their own Instagram page. Not that I'm trying to like share that. But yeah, so again, like I'm really excited to be here and answer any of your questions if you guys have any.
Awesome. Should we move on to Grace?
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone, I'm Grace. I'm currently in the middle of my 4th year at the University of Waterloo. I'm in this kind of new program called Global Business and Digital Arts, and I'm currently a product design intern at Facebook. I've also previously worked with Andy at Deloitte. And before that, I was also in working at a fintech startup. And I guess a fun fact about me is that I can solve a Rubik's Cube. That's kind of just my go-to. Yeah.
Classic. How about we move on to Monik?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, hey everyone, my name is Monik, and I'm a data scientist intern at Ecobee. And I'm going to come back from my 4th year at U of T in September. And I guess a fun fact about me is that when I was younger, like 11-ish, I could write with both my hands. But then my teacher made me quit it because they said it's not good for cognitive development. So yeah, that's a fun fact about me. And yeah, looking forward to the discussion. Any questions you guys have about data science, AI, hit me up with those.
It's a pretty cool, interesting fact. And sorry.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Sari. I, just like Mohammed, recently graduated from UFT studying electrical engineering. I joined last month Roblox as a associate product manager. And for those that don't know, Roblox is like a gaming company similar to Minecraft and Fortnite. Throughout university, I did a bunch of different internships to kind of figure out where I want to be. Initially, I was really interested in business and entrepreneurship. I did a consulting internship at Accenture. I did some software engineering internships at Tesla and Roblox, and kind of ended up landing at product management, which is kind of a mix between entrepreneurship and the tech side. So glad to answer any questions relating to that. And a fun fact I kind of piggyback off of Mohammed is my sister got two little ducks as pets. So Wacky and Pingy are their names. So lots of fun animals.
So adorable.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so let's actually get started into the actual questions. So let's go around the table and let's get a day-to-day example of what you do in your daily jobs. So if you want to go from experience from your last internship or well, the recent positions you're in, let's start off again with Mohammed.
Okay, perfect. So I guess like unlike other people, like I was always kind of focused towards doing software engineering internships because that is something that I was always gearing towards. And but I wasn't exactly sure what specific area of software development I wanted to go to, which is why I kind of like did different internships at different places to try seeing where I fit in. My regular day-to-day jobs, for a generic, I'm gonna start with like any generic software engineering internship. It starts off with like coming in, catching up or finishing up any last-minute tasks that I have from last day, checking my emails obviously, or like seeing like what new updates are there. Usually the first thing that happens in the morning is like a daily stand-up with my team, 5-minute stand-ups, and we basically discuss what I did yesterday, what I'll be doing today, and any blockers that I'll be facing. And then moving forward, during the day, I'll be working, like basically I just like pick up tasks from my assigned Jira board or like any project management board that we have. Essentially, I'll be picking up tasks from there. It's pretty much straightforward. And obviously, we also have other stuff like daily meetings and daily discussions with different product managers and different business people who would come in. But again, like at this, your day-to-day task kind of like varies when you kind of do specific tasks, per se. And for example, just like a small example is when I worked at RBC, I did their Amplify program, which was basically you work in a group of 4 people where you're a software developer, there's a business analyst, a UX designer, and a data scientist, and you're given a specific challenge. So at that point, you don't really pick up tasks. You kind of like sit with your team, and it's like a startup vibe where like you immediately think about like what's the next step that I can do for my customers kind of thing. Versus like when you work for like a generic company, it's again varies because like you're picking up generic tasks and then you're kind of like working towards like a big project that you're assigned to do.
Awesome.
So,
interesting. So to piggyback off that, do you have a lot of teams you're working alongside of? So is your internal team very big? Are you working alongside different, like the financial analyst team or other teams as such?
Okay, absolutely. So again, it really depends on what specific task you'll be doing. But so generally, like software teams, individual software teams don't. They're around like 10 to 12 people. Like I personally haven't worked in teams bigger than that because it gets really messy and like obviously people like to keep them short because people are working on specific tasks. But yes, teams do collaborate and up to a certain extent, but also teams collaborate in the sense that like they all work towards building a common product, but like each team specifically work on like a particular feature, for example, or like a particular aspect of the thing, which the other team kind of don't pick up. And so that the idea is like basically 2 teams can work simultaneously without heavily depending on each other so that like the tasks don't get blocked by one team and the other team. And that's where a lot of the product managers kind of come in or like PMs kind of come in on because they talk about how to like separate out the tasks between different teams and like the features and whatnot.
So on that note, for the PMs, who was the PM on our group? Exactly. So is that very similar to what Mohammed is saying? Is that the truth, or is that something a little bit different from what you're doing?
No, that's very true. I think it'll help to give a very brief overview of what a product manager actually does, because I think sometimes the role is confused or misleading between companies. So I think product managers usually involve three main steps. The first one is scoping out what product or feature we should build next as a company, as a team. That's kind of the first step. So ideation, doing a lot of user research, seeing what the need is. The second step is actually building out that feature. And this is where a lot of the collaboration happens across teams, working with engineering, design, data science, legal, to actually ship that feature and actually do the grunt work of building it. And the third step is actually tracking the success and metrics of a feature. So if Facebook launches Instagram stories, is that something that's successful in combating against Snapchat stories? That's where kind of decisions are made versus whether to roll out the feature into a bigger base of people, or if we should kind of scale down the feature. So I think product management kind of encompasses those three steps. And regarding day-to-day, similar to what Mohammed said, a big role of a product manager, or the main role, is actually removing blockers from engineering, design, data science teams. So it's a very kind of people-oriented role, which is really cool because you're constantly talking to people, seeing how you can make their work more efficient. And I would say that I spend about 50% of my day in meetings. So this can be about 4 to 5 hours of meetings a day. And the reason why there's so many meetings is because that's where you can bring people together and actually ask the right questions of what the engineers are struggling with. What does design need input for? What is the legal and marketing team's kind of basis? So it's just a really efficient way to get people together. So I think meetings is a big one. Some other things I do day to day is work on product specs and presentations. So these are things when we want to build out a new feature. So for Roblox right now, we're building out a new feature to allow like collaboration and version control for people building games in larger teams. So usually you have 1 or 2 people building Roblox games, but now you're seeing teams of 5, 10, 20 people building games. So we're implementing version control similar to Git that allows people to build games on a bigger scale. So a lot of these things need product documentation to figure out what we're building and also share that information with engineers, designers, and other stakeholders. So we kind of create this documentation, present it, and we show off a lot of the work through meetings, which is really useful. And I think the main role is actually communicating and collaborating. So I think that's kind of really exciting because you get to be involved in a lot of different things. So it's not super in-depth in one area, but you're kind of scratching the surface on a lot of different teams, which is kind of interesting.
Really cool. Thank you so much. Moving into Monik, so a data scientist. What entails a day-to-day task for a data scientist?
Yeah, so just going off of what Momin and Sari said, essentially you go in the morning, you have your stand-up, and you guys discuss, okay, like this is what's on my plate today. And once that's done, so you're just like, it's essentially, as a data scientist, I would say the difference is that you might be asked to do something that's going to be more of a data analytics work, and as compared to some days it's going to be build a machine learning model. We've like cleaned all the data now. It's more like training a model. So you just set up the model to train, and then you're working on something else. So it's like it's a combination of data analytics and you could say a machine learning engineer. So data scientist is somewhere in between of that. But yeah, that's what my daily day-to-day job is. But other than that, it's pretty much similar to what we do. We do have meetings with, like what Sari was saying, that you sit with PMs and you decide, okay, this is what needs to be built and how we can do it. What are going to be the blockers? And then the next thing is, okay, now we know that. So as an intern right now, I'm working with my manager, of course, on this. So it's like if, let's say, me and my manager are together working on a project. So I'm going to be doing, let's say, one part of the project, and he's going to be doing the other. And then in the end, we'll be collaborating. And I guess one of the most important parts whenever you're doing, let's say you're doing an analysis, first of all, when you just do an analysis and you send it over to the PM or someone else to, like, let's say, okay, this is the decision we want to make, so this is the product we want to launch. Sometimes you can do the best that you are queuing your results, but since there's no, there's not like a QA engineers for data scientists, so it's very important to get your work peer reviewed from someone. And that goes for doing an analysis, building a machine learning model, regardless of what your accuracy is coming out to. So yeah, I would say it's pretty much similar to what a software engineer does, as in like the day-to-day routines. It's just the job differs a bit.
Interesting. Now, on that note, I know a lot of AI models have a lot of potential to go wrong.
Yeah.
Is there any backup plan you guys make beforehand, or is there like a plan beforehand to tackle this, or is it just as you go along with this?
Right. So it's mostly going to be depending on the deadline for this. A lot of data science stuff is more into like research. So the deadlines are pretty, so let's say if I'm going to start, so let's say I'm working at Ecobee right now, we have this feature called TOU, it's a time of use optimization. And so what we do is you basically tell us what utility is your energy provider. And then based on that, we're going to figure out the different times of the day when you have different electricity rates. And we're going to try and optimize those, like your timings, so that we can give you the best cooling or the heating by reducing your electricity bill. So that's a feature we had been working on for the past, like when I joined, they were already working on that. So we released that, we got some feedback, there were some bugs in that, and then it's a reiterative process. So with data science, there's not usually a super hard deadline that you have to release this product. It's more like a research, and then you get a tentative deadline. Okay, this is when it has to be ready by. So you have time to like go over your models and keep doing them again and again.
Awesome. Okay. Sorry about that, Grace. So Grace, at Facebook, what's your day-to-day like?
Right. So my day-to-day at Facebook is pretty different from other internships I've had, because I realized that kind of design process really differs depending on what type of company you've joined. So for example, at Deloitte, it was very like client dependent, so the process was a bit different. But to focus on Facebook, first of all, so we do have meetings and stand-ups, and for my team specifically, we have 3 stand-ups a week, and we have 2 design critiques in a week. And what I do on a day-to-day really depends on the needs of my project. I think Facebook in general really values generalists for their designers, so designers that are kind of jack of all trades, and then maybe like specialists later on in their career. But my project is pretty vast in the sense that I worked on discovery and trying to figure out the requirements and engineering considerations. I've had meetings cross-functionally with PMs and engineers to kind of get a better understanding of my project as well. Then there's also the days where I have my head down, I'm designing, I'm wireframing and iterating on the product that I'm building. I've also done testing, so it involves gathering participants and seeing, evaluating the comprehension of the design that I made, if it's feasible, and then again iterating and doing more work to make sure that it captures all the feedback and whatnot. And so now I'm also kind of moving on to more high fidelity designs too. So there's really like Facebook, I think the environment really allows you to take ownership of your projects. So I think all the interns, they're kind of responsible for their own project. And a lot of the design ones, you kind of get this project and you're responsible for it from like conception to shipping. And I think that's one of the really good points. So, and that's Facebook's day-to-day. But if I can kind of touch upon like my experience at Deloitte, which was a lot different. So for that's kind of the environment where it's an in-house product team. But if you're working with clients, a lot of your day-to-day really depends on client requirements, business requirements. So at Deloitte, I was in meeting with clients quite a bit. And then the design wasn't always informed by necessarily the users, but more so like the business requirements. And the design process was a bit different too. We didn't do too much testing. It was very much, it was very fast paced. It was just get those designs out, iterate as quick as you can, and move on. So I'd say, yeah, those two are the experiences I'll touch upon.
Awesome.
That's great to hear. So I think that our next question is, could you guys briefly kind of discuss your interview process, whether you applied online or whether you had referrals? Mohammed, we'll start with you.
Sounds good. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nope.
Nope. Now you're muted.
How about we start off with sorry for now?
Sure. So, okay, so I'll go a little bit back towards also internship recruiting, because this might be relevant for some. So initially, I think when I was recruiting for kind of my first internship, I did the classic applying online. Tried that for a lot of times. We had the UFT career portal, which was okay. Was useless for the most part, but it was okay at times. So kind of went through the whole online application process. It didn't give me a lot of good results, I think, because I didn't have enough experience, and your application just gets lost in the online application portal. Got an internship early on, and then I think I started leveraging LinkedIn a lot more in second year. And I think that completely changed the game for me. So I think since I started going to more networking events and using LinkedIn, the response rate just like skyrocketed. I think it's because when you make personal connections with people, if it's recruiters, engineers, managers, anyone at the company, they have a higher likeliness of actually looking at your application, looking at your resume. And I think that really made a big difference. And when I was looking for my PEY, which is like an extended internship, which we have at UFT, I went to a lot of networking events on campus and outside of campus to just like meet different people. And that's how I got my internship at Accenture. And I think that was really useful to kind of make that face-to-face interaction. And going from there, I started leveraging LinkedIn a lot more to get the internship that I got at Tesla, which was really useful because reaching out to people and kind of interacting on different posts really gets you noticed. So I think that was really helpful because I got the internship of Tesla through LinkedIn, and then I heard about my Roblox internship through LinkedIn. So a lot of things kind of stemmed from networking, and I think after second year, I stopped applying online just because I used to apply to online when I had an internal referral or when I also applied through a person, because just applying online blindly, I found doesn't really work well, especially for some of the more competitive internships or some of the more competitive new grad positions. So I leveraged LinkedIn for kind of both of my internships. And then when it came to full-time recruiting, I was able to get some return offers from companies that I interned at previously, which was really useful. And I also kind of recruited externally, again, through lots of internal referrals, LinkedIn, face-to-face networking. And eventually, I think you realize that a lot of people you meet through your internships, through school, through different like extracurriculars, clubs, those people are really good people to keep in touch with because they go on to work at different companies. Like people on this call might be at different companies that you want to work for in the future. And a referral can go a really long way. So I think it's really useful to kind of make those connections early on, and especially pay attention to your close friends. Like personally, I can say that I have friends from like my class at UFT that work for maybe 10, 20, 30 tech companies that I can potentially ask for a referral in the future. So I think it's really valuable to kind of have those connections both in your like inner circle, but also a little bit more extended on LinkedIn, where you might have 500 or 1,000 people that you don't know very well, but you can actually reach out to them when needed. So that's kind of been my journey there.
Absolutely. On that note, would you say cold calling is an effective way of reaching out to people? Or cold emailing or such?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think it is effective. It's best to start off maybe with people that have some sort of similarity to you. So maybe UFT alumni, or maybe people that have participated at a club you were involved in, or maybe even just people from Canada. I found that when I message someone on LinkedIn saying, hey, another Canadian in the Bay Area, that kind of shows some commonality. So I think that's really helpful. And with cold kind of reaching out on LinkedIn or emailing, I think it is useful, but you just got to focus on reaching out to a lot of people, because you're not going to have like a 50 or 80% success rate. You might get 1 or 2 responses for every 10 you send out. So focus on quantity as well.
Absolutely. Great. Should we move on to Grace?
Right. So interview process. I mean, before I get into interview process, I guess like recruitment, I kind of was the same as Sari. So I started off applying online, on LinkedIn, on job boards, Indeed, and that was for my first internship. And that's kind of how I got my first internship. But again, I also realized that that kind of application process didn't yield too many results very often. And I moved on to focus on networking as well. So my second job, my second internship at Deloitte, I got through attending a bunch of hackathons. You know, recruiters are always present at hackathons, and they're there to look for talent. And that's kind of what I did. Talked to a bunch of sponsors at hackathons that I went to, and eventually found one that gave me an interview. So that was what worked for me. And as for Facebook, I was actually contacted on LinkedIn by a recruiter, and I know a few other interns that also were hired the same way. So it is a good idea to keep a really good like LinkedIn presence, because you never know who's going to come across a post that you've made or your profile in general. And I got really lucky that way as well. And I will say a misstep that I made was a recruiter from Microsoft actually contacted me before, but I didn't trust it because I was in first year, and I totally I was like, oh, no way, like this is fake.
Yep.
So keep an eye on your LinkedIn inbox and things like that. And then as for like the design interview process, it really differs depending on design, depending on like design team or the company. But my process was kind of like 2 rounds for Facebook. It was a recruiter call, and then next it was like this 2-part interview for round 2, which it contained a portfolio walkthrough and app critique. And I know other companies also do like whiteboard challenges and on-sites, and those are things to keep in mind for the interview process.
So Mohammed, is your mic working again?
Yep, I think it's working.
Yep.
I think I unplugged my headphones for a bit. No, I think both Grace and Sari covered all the steps that you generally take for an interview and a job, for sure. One thing that I was going to mention, which was also iterated by Grace, was hackathons. Hackathons are very key because, especially as a first year or second year, it's really what I found was really challenging for me. It's like at any job fair I would go to, it's really hard to like make a difference because like you have these upper years who are coming in bombarded with experiences, and you're like a first year and you're just like, oh, like I can't stand out, right? But at a hackathon, you can actually show off your skills and like talk about like the product that you're building or like a new skill that you're learning, and like obviously reach out to people. And you'll be surprised how many recruiters from different companies like reach out to you and reach back to you, obviously. And you make that small connection, and it really goes a long way. At least like that's what I figured for software for sure. Referrals, I would say 100% are more effective than just cold applying online. I think if you are applying online, apply early. And this is something that I didn't know till like when I started applying for new grads, because that's something that I learned over internships, that because like you don't really hear about job postings, and when you do apply for job postings, it's like you're kind of like halfway through the game, and like people, like half the people by that point already probably have had their interviews. And obviously this is like a first come first serve basis thing. So make sure you apply early as soon as the application's kind of open if you are applying online. And then there are different recruitment seasons as well. So if you might want to keep an eye on that as well. And the other thing is like, I think with referrals and applying online, your application definitely stands out. Making that connection with the recruiter really helps. And even if that means that like you're cold messaging them on LinkedIn, which I have done so many times, especially as a second year and third year. And yes, 80% of the time they would probably just look at it and not reply back to you. But the rest 20% of the time that they look at it and do reply back to you, that's still like a win for you, because at the end of the day, if a recruiter looks at your message and like if you can make that one-to-one connection, they can kind of like advocate for you, and like they can push your resume forward in the hiring process. So I would say definitely make use of that, which would put your application like up forward. And in terms of the interview, once you, I guess like for software, I'm not sure if it's like if it varies with any other process, but like with software, once you have your interview set, by that point it's almost like, I would say it's almost 90% your skill, because at that point it doesn't really matter. Like it does matter up to a certain extent on what's on your resume. Obviously I would say don't lie about what's on your resume, but also like with software interviews generally, like it's like a lot of like coding and algorithm questions. So once you have your foot in, make sure you practice, and like you have to like do a lot of mock interviews, a lot of lead code, and I'll definitely talk about those like in more in detail. But a lot of coding practice and like a lot of like practicing of system design and talking to your friends and like hearing about their interview experiences. I think it's like a whole package of like you selling yourself through your skills. So once you get the interview, that's when you like really need to like keep on practicing and like making sure that like the interview doesn't go out of your hand at the end of the day.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. And Monica, do you agree with most of the things that have been said?
Oh yeah, it's basically I was gonna go off the point of hackathons, but Grace and Momin already mentioned that. So yeah, I think hackathons are more useful than any other thing. Both my internships have been through hackathons, this PEY and the one before this. So yeah, definitely go to hackathons and talk to recruiters, and definitely ask for their contact information, like their cards, or add them on LinkedIn at the hackathon. And then when you reach out to them, like just try and make a memorable connection. So when you reach out to them, you're like, oh, hey, remember, or like I'm this person from the hackathon, and that's how we started talking. So they have an image of you in their head. And yeah, I think, yeah, that's about it. You guys already mentioned everything, I guess.
Awesome. So I have a question for everyone. How important do you guys believe grades are in terms of recruitment process? How important are grades? That's a very big question everyone's had. How about we
I
start
have
off?
personally not found them useful. Like they've never really asked for my transcripts for any internship that I've applied to, except for the PEY, I guess. But any other internship that I applied to, they never really looked at my transcript over there.
Okay.
So yeah, but it can matter, depend from company to company, I guess. So
yeah.
I'll
How
say-
about you guys?
Sorry, should I go?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'll say for design specifically, I don't think grades really plays a part in recruitment. They really only look at your resume, and also your portfolio is like the main point. Anything that a design recruiter needs to know should be in your portfolio, and they're mostly looking for your technical skill and design process within your portfolio, and like grades aren't really a good reflection of the skills that they're looking for, really.
Okay. I guess I can go after. I think grades, like some companies do ask for grades in terms of software internships, but I don't think they are important at all. Like obviously no one looks at your grades. It's like a pre-requirement, kind of like as a part of the application. It's like, like what was your GPA? I guess like especially with Google, if you pass the coding challenge on the first round, like on the second round before getting your phone interview, they generally ask you to upload your transcript and talk about your tell them your GPA. And if the GPA is like it doesn't meet the bar, then they kind of like ask you to explain why is your GPA, like they ask you to write a paragraph about it. But they again, like that was like the only one harsh end that I saw, that with like one of the bigger companies, so like why like they asked for GPA. And also I wanted to mention that like I also failed at like getting a job at other big companies too. So just so you guys know, that's why I have like I'm okay with talking about this, obviously. But at the end of the day, I think like grades really don't matter. It matters on like, especially with software, it's like how you, again, like as I mentioned, it's how well your interview goes, especially with your skills and algorithms. Because at the end of the day, if you want to test a developer, it mostly comes out through the rounds and rounds of testing that they do during the interviews.
I feel like grades is like a really iffy topic. I think it also kind of extends to like how much does your university name matter, or like all those things, and it's really hard to get a stance on that. In my view, I feel like it can help. Like if you look at your resume as a scorecard and you're assigning points to like every experience or everything on your resume, like an internship might give you 2 points in the recruiter's perspective. A side project might give you an extra point. A hackathon might give you a point. Maybe grades can give you a point or two depending on if they're okay to good. So I feel like they do play a role, or at least that's what I try to tell myself. But I found that it could give you an advantage if maybe other things are lacking, or maybe it's something that's good enough to show off. So I feel like it does play a role, but only in the kind of getting an interview process. Once you have an interview, I think the importance of that goes to zero. But in terms of kind of getting noticed, I think it can be a differentiating factor. But I wouldn't say that the opportunities for someone with a 4.0 are not accessible to someone that has a 2.0. I really think it kind of depends on how much like you hustle, reach out, network. But I think having a 4.0 or a 3.5 or a 3.0 might be a little more beneficial to get noticed by recruiters early on.
So the next question that we had was, how did you prepare for your interview? What kind of tactics worked for you? Monik, do you want to take a stab at this first?
Sorry, you said Monik or Monik?
Monik, go ahead.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I guess like if you want to, you said prepare for an interview, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess to prepare for an interview, it's so for me, in my experience, one of them is definitely lead code, like Momin was mentioning, and the other thing is definitely know what's there on your resume, because sometimes we tend to. I did this mistake in my first year. We just put on a lot of stuff that we know, and a lot of like side projects which we've just like worked bit on, and then we're like, oh yeah, this was my side project. So when you go into the interview room, the first question they're going to ask you is go off of a side project and then be like, okay, so how did you do that? And if you haven't really done it and you've taken it from, let's say, GitHub or something and just put it in your profile, that's going to raise a problem unless you know how it works, because they really ask you like in-depth questions. So in my, like for my interview for the data science position, I had some hackathon projects that I've worked on. So I actually knew what was going on. So they didn't really ask me any questions for any like the technical part other than what I had in my resume. And so let's say one of the models was building an NLP model for Toronto Police Services. And so the whole interview basically just revolved around that project and how I was using what model I was using. And the person in the front is going to, like, my interviewer was my VP of data science. So you cannot really like fool them by saying anything that's going to be just like getting by it. So yeah, definitely know what's there on your resume other than the basic technical skills, I would say.
What about you, Grace? Because it's kind of different from like software and like data science.
Right. So generally for interviews, there's like 3 main types of interviews that usually happen for designers, and that's going to be your portfolio walkthrough, app critique, and whiteboard challenge. And I'll speak mostly to portfolio walkthrough and app critique because I haven't actually done a whiteboard challenge before. But what I did is the recommendation for portfolio walkthroughs is always to have a set of slides prepared that walks through your project. And you usually want to structure them in a way that frames the problem you're trying to solve for every project, kind of the process that you took to get to the end ship project. You want to focus on like research you did, the decisions you made, why did you make certain decisions, and things like that. And that's all in this presentation that you'll show to the interviewers. And you also want to, go through that presentation with someone, do a lot of mock interviews. Usually, I reach out to more experienced designers than myself to give me feedback on how the presentation looks, timing, and the things that I've said. And I've noticed that depending on the company too, they look for different things in your portfolio walkthrough. So I had help from someone who had interviewed at Facebook before to kind of guide me as to how to structure the interview in a way that Facebook is looking for. So definitely use LinkedIn again, use that to your advantage. Reach out to designers and ask for feedback. And then for the app critique, for those who don't know what the app critique is the interviewer will choose an app that's on your phone and then go through the app with you. And the whole interview is essentially you're sitting there with the app and kind of nitpicking it and you're vocalizing to the interview why you think the app was designed a certain way. So like, why do you think there's buttons here? Why do you think it's like this icon or that component? And the structure of an app critique is usually to, again, frame what you think the business problem was and how the app solved it, the user groups, and pretty much go through page by page of the features, kind of from a higher level to more specific UI details. And for this, the way I prepared for it as well was also through mock interviews. I sat on virtual calls with people and went through apps and asked them if my thinking was correct. And if I'm, and it also has to do with presentational skills too. You don't want to ramble. So yeah, pretty much mock interviews with experienced designers to get feedback and go with that. Yeah.
Sounds good. How about you? Sorry, I guess it's because PM is kind of the trifecta, last of the trifecta here.
Yeah, definitely. So I think a really good starting point is a book called Cracking the PM Interview, which is similar to Cracking the Coding Interview for the software side. So I think Cracking the PM Interview gives a really good baseline of what to expect from the interview process. And obviously the beginning is the recruiter phone screen. That's kind of general company information, maybe basic product questions. But the real meat of the interview process is the product related questions. And they follow usually 4 to 5 general formats. So one of them is designing a product. So how would you design an elevator, or how would you build an elevator for the blind? Those type of really open-ended questions. Another one might be an estimation question. How many orders do you think Uber Eats gets in Canada per day? Just like very general open-ended estimation questions. Another one is kind of how would you improve Twitter? Just like very open-ended, those types of kind of product-related questions. And there's a few other types. And what they're really trying to get out of it is see how you think, and more importantly, how you structure your thoughts. So I think as a PM, you need to be very structured in your approach, and typical kind of formula is start off with the user, figuring out who your customers are, and then segmenting those users into maybe like the teenager age group, the millennial users, and then going from the user all the way down to like what are the pain points, what are their problems, how are kind of what are their needs, and then going from that to how would you solve their needs. So what are some possible solutions that you can bring up? So let's say for the Twitter example, let's say we're targeting the teenager user group, and one of the biggest problems is big group conversations in 5 or 10 people. So they have different problems in terms of having a hard time communicating. And then you kind of present 3 to 4 solutions on how you would solve that problem. And then you go through prioritizing. So I think a really kind of important part of the process is structuring your approach and also validating your prioritization. So as a product manager, you're going to have to do 500 things in your day-to-day, and you want to prioritize such that you do the 2 or 3 most important things and kind of use your engineering, design, data science resources really effectively. So I think the interview process does a really good job in terms of reflecting the day-to-day of structuring, communicating, leading, prioritizing. So that's kind of what the interview process encompasses. And this is done through phone calls, video calls. Another part of the product manager interview process, I think this is a little bit more applicable for full-time, but some internships have this as well, is like a product challenge or product assignment, where the company usually asks you to design a new product or feature. So how would you design a new feature for Uber or for Lyft? And I did a few of those kind of during my recruitment process, and I posted them all on LinkedIn if anyone wants to take a look. But I think they were kind of very similar to the actual interview questions, where they ask you to structure your approach, validate it, back it up, see how you prioritize stuff. And I think it's a really good exercise to do when preparing for these interviews. And as well as mock interviews, like everyone mentioned, those are really useful to kind of simulate the real-time environment, because practicing questions by yourself is very different than kind of practicing with someone else, where you need to voice your thoughts and work together.
Amazing. All right. So it's 8:43 right now. I think we're going to move into the Q&A panel from the audience. And so we picked out a couple questions from the chat, and I'll start with the first one that we saw. So this one's from Hyman specifically. What level of coding do you use at Microsoft? Do you need to be a crazy smart whiz? Or like what kind of level of leak code are we talking about, or designing the algorithms and machine learning itself?
Okay, good question. So I still haven't started at Microsoft. Just so you guys know, I start in August next month. But I can talk about like what led me into getting my what was the level of difficulty that I got, like in terms of the question, if you're looking comparing lead code. And I'll talk about like Microsoft and all the big 4 companies in general, like what level they're expecting. So with Microsoft, I figured that like if you just do lead code, easy to medium level questions, that's what I figured. Like so my interview experience was like I had a phone call interview, which basically I had to solve a coding question. And then once I passed that, then they took me to Seattle. I had my onsite and had my 4 back-to-back interviews. The first 3 interviews were technical, like they're coding, and the last one was like half technical, half system design. I guess like the level of difficulty that kind of went was like the first interview was the lead code easy, and the next 2 were lead code medium, and like they were the generic lead code medium questions that I kind of like when I was practicing, I saw both of the questions. And then the last question kind of like touched upon a bit on lead code hard, but it wasn't really lead code hard. It just like it made you think like a bit more. It was like designing a game, and I guess like kind of like going back and forth like system design, and then they picked on like one of the algorithms of that game design, and then they were like, okay, design the algorithm for that particular part. So that was the level of difficulty. And I guess like most of the FAANG companies that I interviewed, Amazon, Google, Facebook, all three of them were along the same lines. Facebook and Amazon were definitely also lead code medium, and lead code easy, I would say. Whereas Google went on to like asking a couple of lead code hards, like with just dynamic programming, essentially. So that was the level of difficulty that I experienced with like most of the companies that I interviewed.
And when you entered one of those interview questions and you were at a point where you didn't know what to do, what did you do in that situation?
Okay, absolutely. So there are like 4 or 5 steps that you need to take before solving any question.
Oh no, we lost them. Well, I guess in the meantime, we could just move on to the next question. And you want to take that one?
Yeah, so it's for Grace. So it's how do you make a portfolio that stands out to recruiters?
So I would say for standing out, I think recruiters generally take 3 to 4 minutes to glance at a portfolio. And one thing that captures everyone's attention is good UI. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily like you have to have good UI skills, but pretty much make your portfolio look clean. And it's not bad necessarily to use like Squarespace or Wix or something. That's something I've done before as well. But in specifically for your case studies, a lot of the times, if recruiters are only spending 3 to 4 minutes looking at your portfolio, it's not always. I know some people have really long paragraphs of text for their case studies describing their process. And one thing that I've done before is try to turn that text into visuals. When something is in a visual format, it's much more easily digestible, and people can get a better idea of your project a lot quicker than having to read all of the text that's involved with your case study. So that's using diagrams and using like big letters for key points of your case study. And I think that's worked for me before as well. And I think there's not necessarily like a certain skill that you have to focus on in your portfolio that needs to stand out like one, like there's not one specific skill that needs to stand out over the others. For example, like even at Facebook, they like generalists more than specialists. But one thing that's good to learn in general is just learn as much as you can. If you haven't done animations yet, maybe that's something you want to incorporate in your portfolio just to say, hey, I've dabbled into this as well. And it's also impressive on your portfolio as well if you can have some sort of moving visual graphic.
Sounds good. Rohit, do you want to ask the next one?
Yeah, for sure. So this one's for Sari. A lot of because of the recent situation of COVID-19, a lot of new graduates are having difficulty getting new jobs. What are your thoughts on how they could go about avoiding this problem?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I've talked to like a lot of students that are kind of going through this, and one piece of advice I've given that I think kind of goes across the board, no matter what area you're looking for, if it's product engineering, data science, is try to look for companies that are either not affected by COVID or are doing better because of COVID. So these are usually, let's say, gaming companies because everyone's stuck at home, video conferencing companies because everyone needs to use these tools, hardware companies that sell webcams and computers, food delivery apps. There's a lot of companies that are doing very well that are kind of hiring like crazy. So I know Roblox and some other companies are hiring 2 to 3 times the amount of people they would usually hire just in order to kind of meet demand for the explosive growth. So I would kind of recommend looking at those types of companies. And again, using LinkedIn. And I think I've been seeing a lot of people being more responsive to LinkedIn messages because of the tough situation. So people are very like compassionate and kind into trying to make things work out. by listening to kind of LinkedIn messages, giving those internal referrals when possible. There's also a lot of different like forums and websites that have an aggregated list of all the job openings currently during COVID. And I think there's also a GitHub repo at one point where there's kind of a bunch of internship and new grad positions. So I would say kind of make sure to target where you're looking and using any resources that opened up because of COVID. There's been a lot of kind of crowdsourced job positions that are kind of coming up. So look into those as well.
Next question that we had was, especially for like data science and PM, is like how do you kind of transition from like software engineering into like data science or PM? And what kind of skills are generally, I guess, thought to be needed for people to make this transition?
Sorry, do you want to go first, or should I go ahead with the data science part?
You can go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I guess for data science, the thing that helped me was hackathons quite a bit. So just do your side projects and go to hackathons and do some side projects which actually involve like show your interest towards it. So for me, I did a lot of like NLP projects and some AI projects at hackathons, and I mentioned those on my resume. And then when I applied from a PUI, I even reached out to the HR manager like through on LinkedIn, like you guys were mentioning before. And I sent her my resume and I told her like, okay, like I've applied through the PUI portal and this is my area of interest. And yeah, I think like doing a lot of side projects helps you a lot. And right now, you even have some courses which you can do for the AI minor, which I'm sure you guys are aware of. It's the APS 360 ECE 421. ECE 421 helps you a lot in interviews, I would say, because that course goes in depth into like the actual math and everything that's going on. So do take that course in UFT if you guys can. But other than that, I think it's like side projects is like a good way to show your inclination towards data science if you want to do it as an undergrad. And yeah, and then just again, like just know what you put on your resume because they are going to ask you stuff based on your resume. So just make sure you know what's going on there. Another thing that you can probably do is what helped me was I did a course on Udemy that involved data science, and Udemy is like pretty affordable as well. It's not like an expensive platform. So do that course, and that goes into a lot of depth and everything. And then you have a certification sort of thing if you want to put that on your resume. So that helps a lot as well. So yeah, that's what I would say. Like as long as you know what side projects you're working on, and you know what's in them, and that you can answer the interview questions, you should be good.
For product management, I think it's a little tricky as well because you can't get a degree in like product management. You can maybe take some courses, and I think Udemy opened one for like an annual degree for product management, and it might be discounted or free now with COVID. But there's two main ways people get into product management from kind of what I've observed. The first one is starting out in software engineering or as a business analyst or as a consultant, some field outside of product, and then doing that for a few years to get more experience within the company or before transitioning to another company. And I think that really builds your credibility. It's very common for software engineers to transition into product management because they have that technical side along with kind of the experience they build through moving up the ranks, maybe managing a team, working with other engineers. So it's very common to transition from software engineering or from some other role, like a business analyst or a consultant. So that's kind of the first way that a lot of people do it. And then the second way, which has kind of popped up more often in the recent years, is like associate product management jobs, which are also called APM programs. And there isn't a lot of these. There's only like a handful. I think Facebook, Google, Uber, Roblox, a few other have this like APM program, and it's usually very limited. Some of the smaller companies like Roblox hire 3 to 4 people. Some of the big ones like Facebook hire 12 people. Google hires 25. And these are really competitive because there's just so few positions. And a lot of people that kind of start off as associate product managers usually have had experience through internships in either engineering, consulting, design. So I think it's kind of another avenue to get into product management right after undergrad, but it might not be accessible for everyone, which is why the first option is what a lot of people go through, which is either kind of being in the engineering technical side or maybe finding a role that's similar to product, like a business analyst or consultant role, and then transitioning later on.
also for you. And well, back to my Hyman, I have another question for you. Did a lot of your university courses help you with landing your position at Microsoft?
So, sorry, he's gonna laugh at this question because he's also here. So a lot of it. So I guess like yes and no together. Because I think what really helped me what really helped me with Microsoft, like a lot of the Microsoft jobs interview process was my own time and effort that I put into like doing algorithms and data structures. So I think the most important course that I did take out of ECE at UFT was ECE 345, which is algorithms and data structures. That kind of gave me a head into the space of algorithms that kind of existed. Some of the cool stuff that I could talk about during my interviews came out of some of the courses, but obviously it's kind of like if you talk, like I was told this before by my mentors and mentors before them, that talking about your coursework during an interview is probably like it varies because some people take it with a grain of salt because they're like maybe you don't have enough side projects, that's why you're talking about your course projects. But generally what happens is if you have a lot of side projects, I would say that like talk about those during your interviews, bring out the challenges that you face on those rather than bring out your school projects. Some of the headspace that the school courses that give you is basically learning about different things like computer security, talking about different cryptography algorithms, or like another course that I took after getting my job at Microsoft. I'm pretty sure that would really help me in the future as well. I guess like distributed systems and whatnot. These are courses that do play along, but overall, all in all, just getting the interview itself and like passing the interview, I would say not quite. Like I would say they played like around 30% of the role. Like the other rest 70% was obviously your hard work, doing algorithms, a lot of leak code question and whatnot.
Okay. And similarly for Grace, I'm not really sure if there's many UX or UI courses at school. So how did you go about saying if your courses are worth it or not?
Right. For me personally, I didn't see that much value in my coursework that really helped with finding jobs or my job at Facebook. We had one, so my program had one UX course, and I will give that course credit because it introduced me to UX because this was in first year when I had that course. And the prof was amazing and really opened my eyes as to how great this job is and aligns with my interests. Other than that, though, I would say all my skills have been built doing side projects and networking and just doing things in my free time and learning stuff in my free time. Because past that, we didn't, like in my coursework at least, we didn't learn too much that was related to design process or working in a business setting. We did have a lot of group projects, so I guess I'll say maybe that helped a bit in a collaboration sense and learning how to work with people you don't necessarily like. So I'll, like to give credit where credit is due. But I even if we had design projects with groups from like my courses, which did happen occasionally, I normally like don't have those on my portfolio or reference them in interviews because chances are all of your classmates have the same project, and it's hard to evaluate like your role in that project, especially in a group setting. How much you've done, and sometimes they might ask like, okay, but what did you specifically do in this project? But it's always like hard to tell, and people can lie. So yeah, I generally stray away from project work in class because everyone else had the same project too.
Definitely. So at this time, just before 9 o'clock, we're gonna just drop a link to the feedback form, and then we'll just continue with the rest of the questions, or as many as we can get through. And you want to follow up?
Yeah, so the next question that we got was, should we be emailing, I guess, recruiters to know about what to expect in an upcoming interview? I guess this is kind of open floor, I guess.
I think in my experience, the recruiter generally tells me what to expect. They'll say, it's a portfolio walkthrough or something along those lines. But otherwise, I think it is a good idea to ask the recruiter what to expect. I don't think that's, privileged information or something, and it's good to know so you can prepare well for it.
I just wanted to mention really quickly, I see a lot of people like saying that they're going to be reaching out, which is really great. I think one thing to note is recruiters are usually the go-to for the people that kind of get reached out to, but recruiters might get like 1,000 or 5,000 LinkedIn messages per week. And I think it makes it really hard to get a reply. So one thing that's kind of underrated is reaching out to like engineers or managers on the team, because these are people that have a lot more time. They don't get as spammed, and people don't think they would be useful. But in reality, those are the people that are most useful, because engineers and managers are ones that hire for the team, and they tell the recruiters that they need people. But if you kind of cut out the middleman and you go to the manager on the team directly, I think that's a really effective way of doing it. So it might be data science manager, design manager, or maybe a designer just on the team. I think that's another way that people can kind of skip the recruiter lineup.
I definitely agree with that point. And also, I mean, on the design side too, if you reach out to a design manager or designer, even if you don't end up getting an interview out of reaching out to them, you can always get really valuable feedback if they have the time to review your work. So yeah, I definitely agree. Don't reach out to a recruiter necessarily, but someone like a full-time employee on the team you want to work for.
Yeah, I was gonna like both of those guys covered, I think, the points really well. For me, I think I generally tried reaching out to recruiters, but also like if you can get someone on the team, they can definitely, and if you can talk to the hiring manager, that is really useful, because I think that also gives you like a head start, because hiring manager is the person. Well, the recruiters actually take your resume and give that to the hiring manager, and the hiring manager is the person who's actually like dividing up your resume to see if you can like actually, if you're qualified enough to interview for the position. So I think if you can get a connection with the hiring manager or like an engineer from the team who can refer you personally to the hiring manager, that goes pretty far, essentially.
Just two other quick things that just like came to mind. One thing is, I think it was kind of mentioned, but the biggest differentiating factor between people that kind of go to career fairs and go to workshops and go to events and people that actually like take action is actually just following up with the people that you meet. So I think it was mentioned a little bit earlier, but you see a lot of people going to career events and just like really hustling, but then never following up after, which is kind of like, what's the point of going through all that trouble? Because I think following up is a really differentiating factor. I think I've had a few interviews that were just like a few people just giving me interviews after I followed up a week after a career fair or a networking session. So I think following up is really important. And another thing regarding resumes, for me, it was kind of a journey to building like the perfect resume or as good as it gets. And what a lot of people do is just keep iterating on it themselves. And you come to this point where you think it's good enough or you think it's great actually. And in reality, if someone else looks at it, there's a lot of feedback that they can give you. So try kind of giving out your resume to 5, 10, 20 people, friends, people at the company you want to interview at. Just get their feedback. I went to a career fair a few times and I just asked the recruiter to give me feedback instead of taking in my resume. And I think kind of iterating on top of that over a few months or over your undergrad makes it a lot better. So just keeping in mind that sometimes other people see what you don't see.
Sounds good. One question that we had, especially from Hyman, was how did you deal with failure after your interviews? Especially because you've done interviews with so many big companies.
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that I kind of like want to stress over and over again, like I made a point before and I really want to talk about this, is like, because you're in this field, it's yes, there are so many opportunities, but I think you also have to take in failure very, very well. I didn't. So at first when I was interviewing, obviously, and when I first had a big interview, I was so excited about it, and I made it to, like I passed the phone round, I passed the online coding challenge, then passed the phone round, and then they fly me out and I go there. So at that point, when I had my on-site, I was super excited, and like, because I've never had an opportunity like that. And after that, hearing a call back after is, I know it's like very heartbreaking and like very disappointing. And it really broke me because at first I didn't know how to deal with the failure. But I think the best way of dealing with it, the way that worked out for me, it's like, don't put all of your eggs into one basket. Yes, it's good to hope that, like, obviously be confident, prepare yourself really well. But once you're done with the interview, just know that you gave your best, and like do your interview in the mindset that like you always think that like, yeah, I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna go in with my best attitude. I'm gonna give it my best, and come out knowing that whatever happens after this, it's not in my control. Like there's no point in me stressing about this. If I get it, it's great. But if I don't, ask for feedback from the recruiter. And a lot of the time, recruiters will reply back to you saying that, hey, it's company feedback to not give you company policy to not give you feedback, or like because we don't want to share these feedbacks. But it's really beneficial if they reply back to it and like learn from your mistakes and move on to the next thing. And I would say just don't put all of your eggs into one basket. For my final year for new grad, I applied to 7 different companies. Like I targeted 7 companies in total. I applied to 7 companies because I targeted 7 companies. And at the end of the day, I think I got 3 or 4, I think, offers from them, and the rest I didn't. But like the ones I didn't, I was kind of sad, but I just took them with a grain of salt, learned from my mistakes, and applied to the next interview so that I don't make the same mistake again.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful. It's a really good point to make. I know a lot of people are dealing with a lot of stress, and stress not coming just from rejection from interviews, but also, to add on to the next question to Mohammed, and sorry, actually, to add on if you want. A lot of students are going to be going through both getting interviews, going to interviews, and doing school in their next coming year. Usually, the hardest year is going to be the last year. Would you agree, just on the side, is the hardest year the last year of university?
I would say second year ECE is the hardest year for a lot of people. And I think once you kind of get over second year, third and fourth year become a little bit easier. I kind of mentioned it in the chat, but what I tried doing is having my harder courses in third year, since it's a flexible curriculum. And that way fourth year is kind of a little bit more free towards going to interviews and actually spending time on the application process. I think it's also nice to know that since you have 3 years worth of grades by fourth year, your fourth year grades don't matter as much if you get a job by fourth year or like during fourth year. So it's okay for grades to go down a little bit unless you're looking to maybe apply for a master's program or potentially consider like an MBA afterwards. So that's kind of my take on it.
Okay, so to add on to that, as a question for everyone then, how would you balance going to class and having these interviews at the same time?
Good question.
And it's open to everyone, so whoever wants to go first, just raise your hand, even just like go at it. Yeah, behind.
Or Grace, you can go. I think.
Okay, yeah, great. Actually,
I just want to get my comment out of the way, just because my arts program has a lot of free time, so I haven't had an issue with that. So please go ahead and give your advice.
So I think one of the biggest thing with adjusting your flight schedule, like flying out and interviewing, it's like start prepping early. What I did last year was like, I actually, while I was working at RBC, and I'm not sure if my one or two of my RBC friends are on this call or not, they can back me up. But basically every day I would take some time, like at least an hour before going to work. I would just do practice lead code or do an algorithm question or do like something new essentially for the next hiring season. So I prepped myself all throughout summer. Like I learned these new concepts and I kept on prepping myself all throughout summer. And then because I knew that once school started, I wouldn't be able to like put in so much effort into it. So once school actually started, whenever I had an interview, I didn't really need to start from the bottom. And because I had that prep done, so I would just review the main concepts that I noted down for myself, and then just have them over, like just review them for like, I would start like a week or week and a half before my interview, do like 2 or 3 like challenging questions a day. And for anyone who's prepping for software engineering internships, I think personally, I'm not like a lead code I don't know, ambassador or anything, but I would personally advise getting Lead Code Premium because it's really the way they do it. It's like they actually tell you, like Lead Code Premium actually shows you what questions have been asked by what company. So you can actually filter out specific company type questions. And even even having that and studying just for like a week and a half gives you like a really big heads up, like than just not having anything and then just like randomly doing questions out of the blue, for sure. So I think in that way it really helped. And obviously do your assignments, don't lose track of your school. If grades are important to you, do that, but just add on to like doing 2 or 3 extra questions a day. And please get enough sleep. I didn't, and I know my friends will be laughing hearing this, but I think one of the biggest things that helped me getting my job is like in 4th year, balancing everything is like I got a lot of sleep. I gave myself a lot of like time to sleep, and it really helped me to like clean up my mind for sure to I guess like to approach any interviews that I had.
We'll just second Mohammed on everything he said. I think the summer is a great opportunity to get a head start on the recruiting season. And the really cool thing is a lot of like the big tech companies and competitive positions hire super early. So this is like August, September, October, maybe November, a year in advance. And that's a really kind of big advantage. And I found that some of the companies that hire later maybe miss out on some good candidates because by the time it's like October, November, December, a lot of people already have offers or have accepted offers. So I think prepping during the summer is a really good way to kind of get a head start.
Absolutely agree with that. So right now it's 9/11. We were aiming for a 9:10 cutoff, but at this point, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Thank you guys all for joining. Thank you the panelists for joining and answering these questions that came out of nowhere for some people. And I really appreciate these responses. They're really well thought out, even though you guys didn't have much time to think about them. But again, really amazing answers. Really appreciate all your effort, and thank you guys for joining. And thank you for the audience for coming in and joining us for the hour and a bit. So at this point, I guess it's coming to a close. And again, once again, I like to mention the feedback form is in the chat. I'll drop the link again once at the end. And again, for the next panel, if we haven't answered a question in this one, please join again for the next one, and we'll try to get to that as well.
Just for anyone that has any more questions or something pops up, just like connect with us on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. It doesn't have to be formal. Like I think a lot of us would be really happy to like help out.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep,
Anyone
absolutely.
have UX questions, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a final notice, this meeting was recorded, so we will be posting a link on our Facebook group. So again, please like, share, comment, and join that. But other than that, that's pretty much wrapping up now. Again, thank you all.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Good talk. Nice. Saying sorry again. I haven't seen sorry in ages, so
You know,
yeah.
This was really fun.
Yeah.